the NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion or Belief in New York. I'm Bani Gurul, and on behalf of the committee, I'd like to welcome you all to this very special meeting. We have Naz Ghanea from the UK. Naz is a professor in human rights law at Oxford University. She's spoken to our committee before, and it was on popular demand that our bureau members felt that we should invite her back, and we're very lucky that she happened to be in the US, so it hasn't cost our committee
because it wouldn't be worth that.
And it's definitely have been worth it if our committee had them.
We were actually planning on flying over there. It was so
So we're very happy to have you with us. This also happens to be during the 56th Commission on the Status of Women. So I believe we have some guests here from overseas that are attending the commission. So welcome to you all, and we're delighted that you could be with us. And it's also the reason why it's a very busy time and there are lots of competing events, but we still hope to have a few others people joining us to receive notice of their attending. So there may be some people coming in a little late. Given the fact that it's the Commission on the Status of Women, we had asked Naz to gear her talk to the issues of women and freedom of religion and belief. Hence the topic that she proposed, are religious women really women? And it's a provocative topic. It's a thought-provoking topic. One person even told me it was a little off-putting to her, and she was wondering whether she wanted to be here for this. But I see her around the table. I would not disclose who it is. So
it was you.
So Naz has just told me that she's going to give a brief talk and then open it up to discussion so we can explore a conversation on relationships between gender and religious identity. So I turn it over to Naz.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And I have to say I'm going to defer to you regarding the expertise on gender. So I'll set the scene, and I'm really interested in your feedback on it. I also have to say I have a bit of concern that this topic is also context specific. So I hope it still speaks to you or has some correlation with your own thoughts, but we'll discuss that further at the end. So, are religious women really women? Is this discussion worth having? The reason I'm raising it is that the voice of religious women is rarely heard. They're rarely given a platform, and they're rarely given agency. We rarely see them portrayed, for example, in the media, voicing their own concerns, fighting their own battles, raising their own issues, and championing the rights of others. They're othered, they're distanced from us in the media, they're projected as hijabi women, as submissive, as Afghani women, victims of honor killings, of female genital mutilation and polygamy, and so on. So they challenge us, perhaps, because they're not private about their religion. And we seem to have a tendency of objectifying religious women and casting them continuously, perpetually as victims. Now, if you come from a particular religion or belief tradition, maybe this doesn't make sense to you in your immediate context. But what I'm talking about is in the public context, and particularly in the human rights system. So in the human rights scene, religious women are dissected. They're either persons holding a religion or belief, and when I use religion, I mean religion or belief, because in the human rights system, the two come together. So if I use it as a shorthand, please forgive me, but I do intend its full implication in human rights terms. So in the human rights scene, I'm suggesting that they are either, their rights are upheld and they're projecting either as women or as persons holding religion or belief. The very architecture of the UN human rights system categorizes them. Now, it also categorizes other women. So the girl child is child and woman. A woman holding a person with disability, a woman with a disability is woman and a person with a disability, and an elderly woman, etc., etc. So the system is prone to that kind of dissection. But I'm saying that in certain intersectionality has been welcomed for the girl child, for example, but we haven't seemed to have given space to the idea of the religious woman. With gender and race, women of color have come into the system through certain world conferences and norms, and also the girl child. Now, when religious women have claims within the human rights machinery, then too they seem to be forced to make a choice between their religion or belief and their gender. In the human rights system, after all, tradition is to be vigorously contested, and that's particularly the case with CEDAW. Tradition is something that is to be confronted. States have the obligation of confronting tradition in cases where it stereotypes against and discriminates against women. And it's only in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights under Article 18 that we then find reference to freedom of religion or belief. So as religious women, as that whole, there is no mention of them or no recognition of them, either in CEDAW or in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, in the 1992 Declaration on Minorities, in the 1981 Declaration on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. They are absent as a category of religious woman. Now, I think this has happened for the best of reasons. And if we look over the past 5 or so decades, we look at the world conferences on women, we look at the origins and development of CEDAW and its optional protocol, then the uncomfortable fit of religious woman makes sense. I mean, we can understand it. Privacy is something to be confronted in our concern for gender rights. It's in the private sphere, in the domestic sphere, in the religious sphere that we have witnessed a lot of discrimination against women, and therefore that vigorous confrontation and that perhaps negative stereotyping of women in religion, our expectation that women in religion are subjugated and discriminated is understandable. There are, after all, many entrenched practices that need to be confronted in the private sphere and including in the religious sphere regarding discrimination against women. So this has made us vigilant regarding women in the private sphere, and this has colored our perception of the religious woman. But I'm saying that this has also frozen our picture and our snapshot of religious women in one particular direction. The role of religion in discriminating against women is, after all, well catered for and well acknowledged in human rights documents. One author says that no social group has suffered greater violation of its human rights in the name of culture than women. And I would say that, when we say culture, we often mean particularly religious culture. It's not the only culture that we are concerned with regarding discrimination against women, but it's certainly a key component of our concern with culture. If we look, for example, at the reports of the UN Special Rapporteurs on freedom of religion or belief, the late Abdel Fattah Amor, in his 2002 report, said that many forms of discrimination against women were based on or attributed to religion, tolerated by the state and in some cases enshrined in legislation. At the heart of this problem lies the fact that discriminatory and harmful practices against women, such as female genital mutilation, polygamy, discrimination related to inheritance, sacred prostitution, general preference to have boys, are often perpetuated by individuals or communities who perceive them as a religious obligation or as being part of their freedom to manifest their religion or belief. Now that's interesting. If people are believing that part of their manifesting of their religion or belief is to perpetuate these practices that discriminate against women, then you're setting up a clash, a very definite clash between freedom of religion and gender rights. But Amor went on to say that religions have not invented discriminatory and harmful practices against women. Rather, these practices are mainly attributable to a cultural interpretation of religious precepts. The concepts of culture and religion are, however, inextricably linked. It is therefore difficult to disassociate religion from cultural customs and traditions, since religion is itself a tradition. It's quite complicated, isn't it? So he's saying that, yes, some people, as part of their manifestation, discriminate. Then he's saying that religions didn't invent it, but then he's saying, nevertheless, they can't be disassociated. Therefore, I mean, it's quite a complex idea to portray, and maybe some people would challenge how he's articulated that. Asma Jahangir, again another rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, said in her 2009 report that discriminatory and harmful practices against women, including honor killings, polygamy, marriage of underage girls, and prohibition or coercion to wear religious symbols, religion-based personal laws, in particular in the areas of divorce, inheritance, custody of children, and transmission of citizenship, these were all areas in which she had concerns regarding religion or belief and gender. So considering, it's no wonder then, I mean, the fact that women may be discriminated in the name of religion or within the laws of religion is well catalogued in the human rights sphere, not least by the experts regarding religion or belief, okay? So it's no wonder then that often religious women as a category are a category to be pitied. They're kind of a contradiction because they are trying to, maintain association and to identify themselves as both religious and women. And perhaps they are pitied because, others might believe that they have been entrapped into religion. The UN Human Rights Committee cases also, agree that women are discriminated against in the name of religion, but also take us somewhere further. And I've taken the example of Hudaberganova versus Uzbekistan, a 2004 case. And this is a Uzbek student of Persian at Tashkent University in the Islamic Affairs Department. And in her second year, she decides to wear a headscarf. They closed the institute, saying that she and others who are trying to wear the headscarf have made the institute no longer tenable. They throw her out of her dorms. They disqualify her from her studies. They come and speak to her parents to try and persuade them to put pressure on her to no longer wear the headscarf. And the Human Rights Committee does find a violation of her freedom of religion or belief. There's also a European Court of Human Rights case regarding a woman who wants to wear the headscarf, and that's Shaheen versus Turkey. Shaheen is calling us. In this case, Shaheen is a medical student in Istanbul, and she wants to wear the headscarf, and of course that's against Turkish laws. This was, I can't remember exactly, about 7 years ago. She wants to wear the headscarf, and the European Court of Human Rights doesn't find a violation of her freedom of religion or belief. Why? Because there's due diligence in favor of the state, and the state's law is trying to uphold secularity, and therefore tough luck. And she leaves Turkey and finishes her medical studies in Germany. We're starting to get a richer picture of a woman who is choosing to manifest her religion or belief and is also a woman. And here, Shaheen continues her studies. She leaves the country and succeeds in her objective, albeit that violation of her freedom of religion or belief is not found. So, the picture we have, perhaps more in the European context, the picture we have of a headscarf wearing woman as being subjugated and submissive, Shaheen challenges that because she is an agent of change. She finds a way forward to uphold both, and she doesn't give in to demands that she shouldn't manifest or she shouldn't express herself in a particular way. So how would the UN human rights mechanisms be able to uphold the right of a woman to be both religious and woman? I think there needs to be a much closer cooperation between different treaty bodies. I also think that although CEDAW has been so confrontational on traditional practices and tends to put religion as a whole within that category, I think CEDAW too needs to become more perceptive and more sensitive regarding the fact that religion isn't always a category to be fought against. I can also think of examples where human rights NGOs might want to be more perceptive, and perhaps I could even say less paternalistic regarding religious women. There are multiple accounts of being a woman, and feminism in many countries suffers from being elite and rich and out of touch. I know that the thematic issue is about women, rural women, isn't it? And it's critical in the development of the women's rights movement in many countries that the multiplicity of accounts of being a woman are engaged and entertained more fully. And I'm suggesting at the international level and in the human rights scene too, we need to be sensitive and inclusive of those multiple accounts, including that of the religious woman. So I don't want to paint all NGOs with the same brush, but let's just say that at the national level and in their projects and in their advocacy, then, if we have too rigid a perspective and preconceptions about women's rights must be upheld purely through a secular framework or purely through an international human rights framework, and that can't be supplemented in any project, in anywhere, with cultural accounts and religious accounts of and laws, then I think that might be losing a trick. When we initiate projects, is there a token consultation or is there a genuine engagement with women at the grassroots about what they see as their current challenge and that they want to overcome? What kind of allowances do we make for that genuine engagement, and so on? And also, of course, consultation with men who want to advance women's rights. This does skirt around some very difficult questions, and that is the question of where to draw the line. And also, there's endless literature and concern from different disciplines about how do we know that a woman's position has been freely arrived at. And is that even possible, that we assume that a women or a group of women can be sort of untouched and raised above their culture, objectively determine their path, and then we should respect their decision about how they want to engage both gender and religious identity. And also, when I talk about religious women, I'm not saying that religion should be immune from all kinds of criticism regardless of the violations that we're talking about. Of course, harms to bodily integrity should be prohibited, and one would expect, and it's quite right, that the human rights movement should be actively engaged in that. I'll leave where to draw the line for the discussion, because that's, I think, for ongoing discussion. But what I'm saying is that we shouldn't presume that religion, gender, binary. We should recognize, of course, that cultures are not static, and religion includes huge diversity, and religion is not always backward and harmful. We need to entertain a space where religion and gender is in harmony. Also, if we have that binary, we are forgetting that women themselves, religious women themselves, may be agents of change, are agents of change within their religion. Now, the literature talks about how women are agents of change within their, where necessary. I mean, first of all, we shouldn't assume that religion is always bad for women, but even having said that, in cases where we believe that there are traditions that are discriminatory against women, what about leaving a space for women as agents of change within their culture, in this case, their religious culture? The literature describes this as translation, textualism, constructivism, and reconstructivism. Basically, translation is when religious women collect religious traditions and stories and texts that give a wider range of ideas about human rights for women, wider than that has been traditionally or is currently being entertained in their culture, in their religious culture. Textualism is using religious texts and cultural texts to help explain the rights of women. And maybe the rights of women in international law are endorsed by reference to those texts. Okay? Constructivism is historically situating why religion may have been given only particular roles in that religion, and saying that now context is different, and therefore women should be given more chances and more variety of options and life opportunities. And that takes sort of a reinterpretation. Okay? And reconstructivism is described as empowering new women leaders to create, new knowledge bases for their communities. Now, putting that to one side, then let's look at the Pew Research Forum's reports on religion in public life from August 2011. They have a report on rising restrictions on religion, in which they say that restrictions on religious beliefs and practices rose between mid-2006 and mid-2009 in 23 of the world's countries. It decreased in 12 countries, and it remained essentially unchanged in the others. So their report suggests that it increased in 12% of countries, it decreased in 6, and remained unchanged in the others. They say that more than 2.2 billion people, that's a third of the world's population, live in countries where either government restrictions on religion or social hostilities involving religion rose substantially, that it did rise substantially in that 3-year period. So although the percentage is only 6%, that's a third of the world population where they note an increase in restrictions on the basis of religion or belief in that 3-year period. I say this just to say that religious women are not only discriminated on the basis of their gender within their religion. Religious women also face other discrimination. And by categorizing them as the poor religious woman within their religious community, we might lose sight of the discrimination and violations of human rights that are taking place, that are being continued against her on other accounts. It could be I'm talking about on accounts of their religion or belief, but also on accounts of their race, their age, etc., etc. So we shouldn't, again, freezing them into one snapshot loses that greater picture of violations that they may be suffering. So I did a bit of homework. I looked at the priority areas of CSW since 1992, and I found that there has never been attention given to women holding religious woman is not an acceptable shorthand. So, women holding religion or belief. There's never been a theme or a sub-theme. I didn't search through all the resolutions, but there's never been one that has been, has addressed this issue. In the 45th session in 2001, which is no doubt because of Durban coming up, the thematic issue was gender and all forms of discrimination, in particular racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. I didn't look at the resolutions, but maybe you recall, were there any resolutions that addressed women and religion? And then the second question is, have there ever been resolutions addressing women and religion in a positive way, not only in raising concerns? Those concerns are legitimate. I'm not saying that they're not legitimate, but it wouldn't be allowing for multiple accounts to not also see it as a platform for empowerment. So, discrimination against women within religion is not the only experience of religious women that is relevant to human rights. Religious women are also empowered through their religion. many religious women feel liberated through their religion or belief. Many draw strength, identity, direction, fulfillment through their religion or belief and their gender. For them, there is no separation between their embodiment of being a woman and being religious. As Eck has said, no one should have to choose between multiple and vital identities. And it's not for us to determine what is a vital identity for them. It is for each person to be able to articulate that and project who they are and what matters for them. So, what are the pictures I'm, seeing about religious women? Well, I thought that if we look at Article 6 of the 1981 Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination on the Basis of Religion or Belief, the Religion Declaration, let's put it briefly. If you look at Article 6, it gives a non-exhaustive list of manifestation of religion or belief. So if we just take that and insert gender, then insert women, then we should consider the role of religious women in worship, their role in worship, women and worship, women and community building, women and religious ceremonies, women and charity, the role of women in holy days, the role of women in training religious leaders, and in fact, the role of women as leaders. And we should take leader, I think, in the broadest sense, and again, as self-defined within a community. Of course, even this is a very impoverished picture of the religious women within religious culture. But it's a good starting point. So as a pushback against the popular and dominant discourse that I see, please tell me if it's different, let's say in India, I hope it is, but as a pushback against the dominant picture I see of the poor religious woman who needs to be rescued and in her pitiful condition, and she should be empowered to instead become fully woman and become liberated. Let's also keep within our minds a picture of the strong religious woman, the religious woman in leadership, the religious woman who is dissenting, the religious woman who is navigating and championing a path that does justice to both her gender and her belief. And let's do that whilst also continuing to give due attention to concerns with women within religion where that indeed is warranted. Let's welcome women in their full diversity and with all their intersectionalities. Thank you.